The creature that God did not create. The mystery of the Nephilim. In the ancient days, before the flood, before the rise of nations and the laws of men, there existed a race of beings whose origins defied the natural order. They were not fully human, nor were they divine. They were giants among men, warriors of great renown, their existence shrouded in mystery and fear. Some called them the offspring of angels and mortals. Others saw them as abominations, creatures that were never meant to be. They were the Nephilim, the beings that God did not create. But who were they truly? Were they fallen angels, hybrid offspring, or something else entirely? And why did their presence on earth invoke such divine wrath that an entire world had to be washed away? The origins of the Nephilim. A forbidden union. The story of the Nephilim is hidden within the depths of ancient scriptures, primarily in the book of Genesis. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. Genesis 6 verses 1-4. This passage is brief, yet it speaks of something extraordinary. The sons of God, a term often associated with divine beings, possibly angels, descended to earth and took human women as their mates. From this unnatural union came the Nephilim, described as mighty, powerful, and feared. But why would heavenly beings abandon their place in the divine order? Why would they forsake their purpose and seek union with humanity? The Book of Enoch, an ancient text not included in most biblical canons but revered by some, expands upon this tale. According to Enoch, a group of rebellious angels, known as the Watchers, desired the beauty of human women and swore an oath to descend together. Taking them as wives. It was not an accident. It was a choice. A rebellion of flesh and desire. And from this defiance, the Nephilim were born. The Nephilim, beings of power and corruption, though often described as giants, the Nephilim were not merely larger-than-life humans. They were something more, something unnatural. Legends describe them as possessing superhuman strength, great intelligence, and an insatiable hunger for conquest. They were warriors, rulers, and beings of terrifying renown. Some believe they were the ancient gods and demigods of mythology, beings of divine heritage who walked among mortals and were worshipped for their power. But their very existence was a corruption. The Nephilim were not part of God's design. They were an anomaly, a taint upon creation. Where they walked, war followed. Where they ruled, destruction came. Their very presence on the earth brought imbalance, and soon, the world was filled with wickedness and bloodshed. It is said that the Nephilim, unlike men, could not be redeemed. They were born from a forbidden union, outside the bounds of God's will, and as such, they had no place in the divine order, and so, judgment came. The great flood, the cleansing of the world. The book of Genesis tells us that as the earth grew more corrupt, filled with violence and evil, God looked upon creation with sorrow. The world had become something unrecognizable, tainted by the Nephilim and the wickedness they brought. And so, a decision was made. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth. Genesis 6 verses 5-7. The flood was not merely punishment, it was a cleansing, a reset, a way to erase the corruption that had spread unchecked. The Nephilim, the Watchers, and the civilizations they built were swept away by the rising waters. Their reign ended in drowning darkness, their monuments swallowed by the deep. Yet, a question lingers. The text in Genesis states that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. How could that be? The Nephilim after the flood, did they survive? The world after the flood was supposed to be free of the Nephilim, yet echoes of their presence appear again in later texts. The Book of Numbers, written long after the time of Noah, speaks of giants still living in Canaan. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Numbers 13:33. The sons of Anak, also called the Anakim, were believed to be descendants of the Nephilim. How could this be? Did some Nephilim survive the flood? Did the Watchers return to corrupt humanity once more? Some believe the answer lies in human bloodlines, that the wives of Noah's sons carried within them the remnants of the Nephilim's legacy, allowing their tainted heritage to continue through generations. Others suggest that another group of fallen angels descended after the flood, repeating the sins of their predecessors. Whatever the truth, the Nephilim were not fully erased. Legends of giants, demigods, and supernatural warriors continued to echo through history, appearing in the midst of many cultures. The Nephilim were gone, but their shadow remained. The legacy of the Nephilim, myth, truth, or prophecy? The mystery of the Nephilim is not just a relic of the past, it is a question that lingers in modern times. Some scholars see them as purely mythological explanations for ancient gods and heroes. Others believe they were real, remnants of a lost race whose history has been buried or erased. And then there are those who say they will return. Certain ancient texts, including the apocryphal Book of Enoch, suggest that the spirits of the Nephilim did not perish with their bodies. Instead, they became restless spirits, what some might call demons, wandering the earth, unable to find peace. Even more chilling is the idea that the Nephilim may rise again. Some believe that in the last days, as foretold in apocalyptic prophecies, the Watchers will return, and the Nephilim will once again walk the earth. A final war between divine order and corrupted creation. A second flood, but this time of fire. The beings that were never meant to bait a Nephilim are a mystery wrapped in legend, a forbidden chapter in the story of creation. They were powerful, they were feared, and they were never meant to exist. They defied God's plan. They altered the course of humanity. And perhaps, in the darkest corners of the world, in the whispers of forgotten texts and the shadows of ancient ruins, their story is not yet over. The Nephilim after the flood, did they survive? The world after the flood was supposed to be free of the Nephilim, yet echoes of their presence appear again in later texts. The Book of Numbers, written long after the time of Noah, speaks of giants still living in Canaan. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Numbers 13:33. The sons of Anak, also called the Anakim, were believed to be descendants of the Nephilim. How could this be? Did some Nephilim survive the flood? Did the Watchers return to corrupt humanity once more? Some believe the answer lies in human bloodlines, that the wives of Noah's sons carried within them the remnants of the Nephilim's legacy, allowing their tainted heritage to continue through generations. Others suggest that another group of fallen angels descended after the flood, repeating the sins of their predecessors. Whatever the truth, the Nephilim were not fully erased. Legends of giants, demigods, and supernatural warriors continued to echo through history, appearing in the midst of many cultures. The Nephilim were gone, but their shadow remained. The legacy of the Nephilim, myth, truth, or prophecy? The mystery of the Nephilim is not just a relic of the past, it is a question that lingers in modern times. Some scholars see them as purely mythological explanations for ancient gods and heroes. Others believe they were real, remnants of a lost race whose history has been buried or erased. And then there are those who say they will return. Certain ancient texts, including the apocryphal Book of Enoch, suggest that the spirits of the Nephilim did not perish with their bodies. Instead, they became restless spirits, what some might call demons, wandering the earth, unable to find peace. Even more chilling is the idea that the Nephilim may rise again. Some believe that in the last days, as foretold in apocalyptic prophecies, the Watchers will return, and the Nephilim will once again walk the earth. A final war between divine order and corrupted creation. A second flood, but this time of fire. The beings that were never meant to beta Nephilim are a mystery wrapped in legend, a forbidden chapter in the story of creation. They were powerful, they were feared, and they were never meant to exist. They defied God's plan. They altered the course of humanity, and perhaps, in the darkest corners of the world, in the whispers of forgotten texts and the shadows of ancient ruins, their story is not yet over.
The forgotten mystery of the ancient giants. Imagine, a time before the flood. A time when humans did not walk the earth alone. A time when colossal beings, born from the forbidden union between fallen angels and mortal women, ruled civilizations with unimaginable strength, supernatural intelligence, and an insatiable thirst for destruction. These creatures were not mere legends. They were the Nephilim, beings mentioned in the Bible, in apocryphal books, and in ancient texts from lost civilizations. Who were they? Why were they destroyed? And could they, in some way, still exist? The story of the Nephilim is one of the darkest and most terrifying in the Bible, a tale of fallen angels, corruption, wars, and divine wrath. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to discover may change everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. The birth of the Nephilim, the rebellion in heaven, and the fall of the Watchers. The Bible tells us that, in a distant time, some angels disobeyed God. And these were no ordinary angels. They were the Watchers, celestial guardians sent to observe and protect humanity. But something happened. They saw the daughters of men and desired them. In Genesis 6 verses 1-4, we find a disturbing passage. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. The sons of God in this passage are widely interpreted as fallen angels, and what happened next was a disaster for humanity. These angels, led by a being called Semjaza, made a terrible decision. They would take mortal women as wives, and nothing would stop them. They swore an oath among themselves. Let us all bind ourselves by an oath, and all swear upon it together, that we will do this thing, so that no one among us may turn back. And so they descended from heaven and corrupted the world. The forbidden offspring, the birth of the Nephilim. The children of this unholy union were not ordinary. They were born as giants, creatures with superhuman strength, an insatiable hunger, and an endless thirst for war. They were the Nephilim, a word often translated as the fallen ones or the giants. They were not like humans. They were beasts of destruction, towering figures who could shatter stone with their fists and bend metal with their bare hands. They were so powerful that nothing could satisfy them. They devoured the animals, the crops, and eventually even humans themselves. Yes, the Nephilim became cannibals. They imposed their rule over mankind, making mortals worship them as gods, and around them, the world began to sink into darkness. But that was not their only legacy. The fallen angels also taught forbidden knowledge to humanity, the art of sorcery and magic, the forging of weapons for war, the secrets of the stars and divination. Humanity became corrupted, and the Nephilim ruled over the chaos. But God was watching, and he would not allow it to continue for much longer. The wrath of God and the end of the giants. When God saw what was happening to humanity, the corruption, the violence, the despair, he decreed that everything must be wiped away. And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Genesis 6 verse 5. So he chose one righteous man to preserve true humanity. That man was Noah, and God commanded him to build an ark, for a great flood would come to purify the world. And then the waters came. The Nephilim were drowned. The fallen angels were cast into the abyss, bound in chains in the depths of the earth, and for a time, the world was free of them. But were they truly gone? The Nephilim after the flood? Did they return? The story could have ended there, but it didn't. Because in Numbers 13:33, long after the flood, the spies sent by Moses to explore the promised land returned with a terrifying report. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. How could this be? If the Nephilim had been destroyed in the flood, how did they appear again? Some theories suggest that a few Nephilim survived. Others claim that the fallen angels returned and created a new generation of giants. Whatever the truth, the Nephilim were not completely erased, and ancient peoples fought against them for centuries. Goliath, the giant defeated by David, may have been one of the last remnants of their bloodline. But were they truly wiped out, or could it be that some still exist, hidden in the shadows of the world? The legacy of the Nephilim and their influence on the world. Even if the Nephilim disappeared physically, their influence was never erased. The forbidden knowledge that their fathers, the fallen angels, brought into the world was never forgotten. Sorcery continued to spread. Cults dedicated to dark forces remained. The desire of some men to become gods still persists today. Many believe that the Nephilim may return one day, and if that day comes, will humanity be ready? Conclusion. The lost history of the giants, the Nephilim, are one of the most mysterious and terrifying stories in the Bible. They were powerful, monstrous, and merciless creatures who defied divine order and brought the world to the edge of destruction. They were destroyed, but never forgotten. Their echoes still exist in legends, myths, and even ancient scriptures. And the great question that remains is, could they return one day? The answer may be closer than we think. And if that is the case, the Nephilim were not part of the world God intended. They were never meant to walk the earth, never meant to breathe the air of the living, never meant to shape the fate of humanity. They were an abomination, the product of rebellion, a twisted consequence of angels who defied their Creator and corrupted His creation. Unlike humans, who were made in the image of God, and unlike animals, which were part of the natural order, the Nephilim were something else entirely. They were beings that should never have been born. The unnatural existence of the Nephilim. Everything in God's creation follows His divine order. The angels were created as spiritual beings, meant to serve and worship. Humans were given physical form, meant to rule the earth and have free will. Animals were placed under mankind's care, part of the balance of life. But the Nephilim, they were outside of that order. They were a mistake, not by God, but by those who chose to defy Him, the fallen angels. In their lust and arrogance, created something that was never meant to be, and the result was chaos, destruction, and the near destruction of humanity itself. The Nephilim were not a new race, nor were they a different species. They were monsters, unnatural hybrids that had no true place in creation, and that is why God wiped them from existence. The judgment of the Nephilim, why God had to destroy them. Many people question, why did God flood the entire earth? Why did He choose such a drastic measure? The answer is clear. Because the bloodline of humanity was becoming corrupted. If the Nephilim had continued to spread, the entire human race could have been lost. The descendants of Adam, those created in God's image, were on the verge of extinction. And so, God intervened. The flood was not just a punishment, it was a purification. A way to erase the stain of the Nephilim from the earth. God did not create them, and so, He would not allow them to remain. The return of the Nephilim. Did they truly disappear? Yet, even after the flood, the Nephilim appeared again. How? Some say that a few of them survived, hidden in the mountains or deep underground. Others believe that the fallen angels returned, once again corrupting humanity and creating new giants. Whatever the case, their presence never truly disappeared. The Anakim of Canaan, the Rephaim mentioned in ancient texts, Goliath, the giant slain by David. All of these could be remnants of the Nephilim's cursed bloodline. And that raises an even darker question. Are they still among us today? Could they be hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right time to return? The answer is uncertain. But one thing is clear, if they ever return, it will not be by God's will, but by the will of darkness itself. The Nephilim were never God's creation. They were a corruption. God, in His perfection, never created the Nephilim. He created angels to be His messengers. He created humans to bear His image. He created the natural world to sustain life. But the Nephilim, they were born of rebellion. They were the offspring of sin. They were a perversion of God's divine plan. And that is why they had to be destroyed, because they were not part of God's creation. They were a corruption of it, a disease that had to be purged, and God, in His justice, ensured that they would never thrive again. The final lesson. A warning to mankind. The story of the Nephilim is not just a tale from ancient times. It is a warning, a reminder of what happens when beings try to play God. The fallen angels tried to create their own version of life, and their failure nearly destroyed the world. Even today, mankind continues to seek power beyond its limits. To alter life in unnatural ways. To challenge the laws of creation. To delve into secrets that should remain hidden. And if we are not careful, we may awaken something that was never meant to return. The Nephilim were erased once, but if humanity repeats the mistakes of the past, they may rise again. And this time, there may be no flood to stop them. May God have mercy on us all.